So anyway, I wanted to talk about programming, this idea of synergy, and integrating it with more traditional based programming, as we talked about being GPP, with more movement competence driven programming. Okay, so I wrote an article a while ago for, I think it was like Breaking Muscle, kind of proposing this overall program and idea of integrating the two together. And so I just compared sort of the current model, which is we have this idea of GPP, general physical preparedness, plus specific physical preparedness, plus specific skill training. That pyramid that we saw yesterday is what we use for performance for elite athletes. Okay, that's sort of the model we're operating under right now. And then GPP just being what we do for anybody. So anybody who walks in the door, we're going to work on their strength and conditioning to help them achieve the fitness goals that they come in to achieve. Okay, and we talked about yesterday like the importance of bringing in this general and specific base of movement competence. Okay, so just integrating the two from a conceptual standpoint is just going to be adding in the PMD aspect of it, the perceptual motor development, that being general GPMD, general perceptual motor development, plus GPP, plus specific perceptual motor development, or sport specific, plus sport specific physical preparedness. It's going to be what we do for performance for elite athletes, and then just general perceptual motor development, movement competence, plus general capacity-based training or general physical preparedness is what we do just for anybody who walks in the door, okay, who doesn't have a specific goal or a specific sport that they're trying to work on. Okay, and just to reiterate again yesterday, what we worked on a little bit was the MovNat model of performance. Okay, so we have a greater base of movement competence to draw from. We have a longer athletic career due to less injuries and maybe just the ability to keep our body safe through moving better. Okay, and we get this nice non-linear movement practice that's going to carry over to some of our non-linear specific movement practice, sport-specific movements that we do that fall out of the scope of what we're doing with barbells and running. Okay, and this model is exactly what we went over yesterday. Okay, their stress type being either perceptual motor development on the neural side, the central side of adaptation, work capacity development being more on the peripheral side of our physiology, okay, strength, conditioning, power, etc. And then these two outcomes produce the movement skill, the base of movement skill that we're looking for, in combination with the conditioning or the work capacity that we try to achieve. Okay, and then there's this idea of periodization, which we talked about a little bit yesterday, which is just how we organize this to maximize our outcomes and keep it from being random. Okay, so it's the idea that training can change over time. We can use principles of progressive overload or whatever we're trying to achieve to peak an athlete's capacity performance near competition time. Okay, because we know that capacity isn't something at a high level that we can just maintain year round, otherwise we burn out. Okay, so it's really about maximizing that at the right time and then recovering at the right time, okay, on season, off season. Okay, and sometimes we organize these into smaller, more manageable blocks. Okay, so it's not always necessarily one big line of, okay, we work to our peak by doing these, and we're working on all these things at the same time. Sometimes we emphasize certain qualities like strength, power, speed, conditioning, whatever it is, into smaller, manageable 4-week blocks, or what we call a mesocycle in programming language. So and the idea behind that is that we're trying to maximize these adaptations, and while we're recovering from one, we're keeping it at a maybe not at the very highest level possible, but at a pretty high level, and we're sort of working on another so that we're getting this cumulative effect of high of an adaptation level as possible. And the classic approach is generally we just have this inverse curve between volume and intensity. Okay, so this would be a real linear approach over time. So we start with just a general base of movements, working towards more specific. Here's competition time, and then there's transition or off-season time. And again, we're starting with high volume of movements. Usually, for example, if it's something like a deadlift, okay, we're starting with a higher rep range and a lower weight. And over time, again, there's a lot of ways we could do this. We're sort of decreasing the reps, increasing the load. Okay, and we can apply this with pretty much anything that we're trying to accomplish, even if it's something like speed. Okay, we can start with drills that are we're doing more volume at maybe not maximum intensity, and then over time we increase the intensity and decrease the volume so that we're still recovering from what we're doing. Okay, and then there was a model, again in the Soviet era, that sort of developed this idea of blocks to elongate the training cycle a little bit. Okay, where there was these blocks of accumulation and restitution. Okay, and again, this is sort of just the block idea in a way. So we have, in this case, explosive emphasis, then speed emphasis, then power emphasis, then back to speed emphasis. Okay, the idea being that it's almost like the same idea of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts with adaptations versus with the whole body. So we have, while one area is sort of recovering and even stays above baseline, we're working on another area instead of trying to do them all at once and getting that either not being able to maximize as much or not being able to recover as much. So here's how we approach this. With the macro cycle, we talked about with MovNat, we're trying to equalize our skill set, right? So we're trying to make sure, A, we don't have any deficits, and B, that all of our movement skills, our aptitudes and capacities are sort of at the same level. Okay, and this is just from a non-athletic perspective. This is just what we're doing for anybody. We're just trying to equalize that skill set. Okay, so we use what we call concurrent with emphasis periodization, which meaning we're trying to work on a little bit of everything. Okay, but during these blocks, these mesocycles of say 3 to 4 weeks, we have an emphasis of what we're trying to work on. And usually it's a skill-based emphasis, meaning we're not trying to work on strength for 4 weeks. We might be working on lifting for 4 weeks, and we sort of work on a little bit of everything else, but we're not just necessarily focused on capacity. Then our next block might be working on jumping for a period of 4 weeks. Okay, which would correspond, of course, to power, right, a little bit. Okay, and you can structure it that way. And then our next one might be based on crawling or balancing or so on and so forth. And you can work on 1 or 2 skills at a time. But there's no way to maximize everything at the same time. So that's sort of our solution, is we're working on a little bit of everything with a certain emphasis that we can sort of really develop. Because we don't want it to turn into random, where we just are kind of doing everything and also really not doing anything. Or giving our body enough stress or stimulus to maximize our adaptation or adaptability. And then what we do is we arrange it so that at the accumulation of these training blocks, we test, since we're not, again, working mostly with direct athletes, which we'll get to that in a minute, but at the accumulation of these, of a period of mesocycles or blocks, we just test against our performance benchmarks. Okay, so we have beginner, intermediate, and advanced level benchmarks that we just try to, again, that our benchmarks sort of represent what an equalized skill set hypothetically should look like to the best of our knowledge on evolutionary fitness, and just compare it to there, and then again we can either work on certain aspects that are deficient, or we can kind of advance them to the next level. Okay, this might sound a little bit abstract right now, but we'll go in. We're going to break down what a workout looks like and all that in a minute. Okay, so here's an example of a mesocycle breakdown. So in this one, I'll just read it because I know it's a little difficult to see. Like our mesocycle 1 is purely just acclimation or restoration. So that might be a lot of ground movement based. Okay, so even like for and crawling especially, or just very, very simple things. Maybe learning how to hip hinge on the ground, like without even standing up. And this would be just, again, pure MovNat programming. Mesocycle number 2 being crawl and balance emphases. Number 3 being lifting emphases. 4 being climbing, and 5 being jumping. Okay, so like our class programming for MovNat is based around, again, these are what's being emphasized during this training block. And then we're also sort of combining things and playing with the skills that we already do know at the end, and sort of generalizing these abilities. So here's a practice session breakdown. We have a warm-up, which we use these ground movements, the natural developmental sequence, which is a bunch of those ground movements that you guys have learned, as a warm-up pretty much each time, and where it's usually guided in some way. That's what we consider a general warm-up. And then we'll do a specific warm-up, which will be very simple movements, foundational movements that directly apply to whatever is going to be done in that particular movement session. So in this case, we have some climbing and we have some jumping. So during the specific warm-up, we've got just basic hip hinging with your body weight. We've got those jump landings that we worked on as just a warm-up, and like a Turkish get-up, which we call a strength get-up with a shoulder load. Okay, and the emphases, which is the next portion, we're working on whatever we're trying to focus on. So during this mesocycle, we're probably working on lifting and jumping. Okay, so we have deadlifts to a broad jump, And then we have just a front hang position, which we're just kind of using as a filler. So something that's not really taxing for just developing another quality. So we're doing those 3 movements on a revolving cycle, just like if we were doing a regular strength-based programming in a way. Okay? And instead of doing multiple sets of revolving sets of a few things, we just focus on these 3 things for 5 or 6 sets. And then we go on to what we call a combo, which is like a finisher or a circuit in a way. But our combos are sort of like what we did outside in a way. There's not a lot of breaks. It's just a lot of continuous movements. Okay? And then with just minimal breaks in between. So we're trying to breathe maybe as we are walking somewhere else, or we're trying to work on efficiency so we can just continuously move for anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how much time you have. We generally do about 10 to 15 minutes. So that's just a kind of a window into our practice sessions. Okay, and for our competence-driven programming, we use volume, intensity, and complexity, but we really emphasize volume and intensity in a nonlinear fashion. Okay, because what I'm saying here is we don't just do purely we're going to increase the volume. Say we're crawling. Instead of just saying, okay, we're just going to crawl more and more and more and more over the course of a mesocycle. Okay, we are going to introduce complexity actually pretty quickly. As you guys have seen, you'll learn a lot quicker if you have these environmental demands that engage you a little bit more. Okay, and we call that the contextual interference effect. Okay, so we actually can improve technique. We can actually improve our adaptability by bringing in the complexity right away. Okay, so as volume goes up, complexity is going to go up, and they're going to kind of go up in a nonlinear fashion. Okay, and then when we start to think about capacity, because we do think about capacity in MovNat, we increase the same way in general as strength programming or traditional-based programming, with volume and intensity inversely related. So as we increase the reps of something, it's usually going to be lighter. Okay, and then we're going to start to decrease the reps and maybe make it heavier. So we can kind of stagger those things. So if volume's going up, complexity can go up over time, or we can bring volume down and we can bring up intensity, and we can kind of change that over time, either within a mesocycle or across two different mesocycles. Here's what I sort of propose as an integrative model to include capacity and competence-based training. Okay, because there's a bunch of different options that we can have. Here's the season, okay, whatever we're trying to emphasize, and then we have over the course of time. Okay, so here what we have is we're going to focus on, in this particular, let's say this is an athlete that's training for a particular sport. Let's say it's, I don't know, basketball or whatever. Okay, in their off season, which is over here, which is after their peak season, or I'm sorry, their preseason, they can focus on traditional capacity-based training. So let's say in their off season, you give them a strength program. Okay, and then as preseason comes about, you can start to work on a base of competence. And when I say an emphasis, what I'm saying is not necessarily one or the other. It's just what the emphasis is. Okay, so a capacity-focused emphasis, which is more the classic model, which can include some of the stuff that you teach them from a natural movement standpoint. And then a competence-based mesocycle, which might be maybe a little shorter. Okay, and then nearer to their peak of their season, then you bring back in the capacity-focused training that they had. Again, even when you're doing competence-focused training, the capacity that they've gained should still remain because they're still practicing it. Okay, and again, right immediately after the season, they can focus on competence. Okay, and these are just broad stroke ideas, but in a peak emphasis phase, what we could do is focus on competence to start, focus on capacity A, and then focus on capacity B right around the peak. So again, if we have a, let's say, the best example I could think of would probably be a wrestler, right? So we focus on movement competence right in the beginning, okay? And of course, we're increasing their capacity as well, because it's built into it, okay? And then we're focusing on a particular capacity, say strength, okay? So we're revving up their ability to be stronger while we don't lose the base of competence. And then we want to focus on power or something right around their season, okay? Maybe they're cutting a ton of weight, so at that point, just maintaining muscle or maintaining strength is going to be the emphasis, as opposed to trying to really gain it at that time, because they're already get a calorie-deprived state. So you're bringing up the reps in terms of strength, okay, but maybe you're focusing on a little bit more power, which is going to be more neural factors than, or neuromuscular factors than muscle-based factors, okay? and then you can go back to competence on the off season. Okay, and I just put the reminder that each emphasis includes both competence and capacity. So just because we're doing, more competence-based movements, like let's say we're doing a pop-up, doesn't mean that we're not doing any capacity. It's just we're reframing it to be included in, or the focus is making sure that we're doing it correctly, making sure that we're maybe adding some complexity to our movements. We're maybe adding more diversity than we would in a capacity-based or focused mesocycle. Okay, and this could just be a general seasonal emphasis. Okay, maybe in the off season we're just focusing on competence, which is going to also increase your baseline capacity as opposed to if you did nothing, and then focused on capacity during the on season to peak. Okay, and we're getting as high as we can with the capacity right around the peak. Okay, and I know some of you might be thinking, like, first of all, how am I going to get athletes to do this? Like, especially if it's unsupervised, like in their off season. How am I going to get them to do this outside, especially, like what we just did? And I would just say that based on my experience, first of all, like when we got assigned as wrestlers strength programs for over the off season, I'd say maybe 20% of my fellow wrestlers actually did them and took it seriously, because that's just reality. Okay, they have to kind of buy into the fact that, or they're probably going to have to buy into the fact that they like it and they believe that it's going to help them. Okay, so in the same way that if you lead them on the on season or when they really need it to improve their strength or their power, and they enjoy that and they continue it on the off season, I think certain individuals, if you lead them on competence-focused training, both inside and outside the gym, that I think that you'll find a certain percentage will do this stuff on their own. Okay, I personally think, again, I'm not in the position where I'm actually applying it as much as I'd like to, because I'm doing behind the scenes stuff for MovNat. But if it were me, I would take a particular athlete or group of athletes. I would take them first inside and incorporate some of this stuff in a subtle way. And then I would take them once in a while outside and do sort of what we did. Okay, go slow, move, include some capacity, have them do it. And I think assigning them some basic stuff that's not risky, okay, for a certain percentage of them, they'll do it because they're supposed to, and a certain percentage will do it because they really enjoy it, and a certain percentage, no matter what, just aren't going to do it because they don't believe in it. And that's going to happen no matter what you assign them, or no matter what you say they should do. So just some food for thought there. Okay, so here's an example capacity emphasized session. Okay, so just again trying to make this as clear as possible. So let's say you're trying to integrate MovNat into your capacity focus here, and let's say the focus is strength and power during this particular mesocycle. Here we got a warm up. We're going to bring them through a ground movement sequence, maybe 5 or 6 movements you think they're going to benefit from. Then you're going to do specific drills that are going to directly apply to whatever they're doing next. Okay, and then you're going to go through some of the basic stuff that they're used to, with maybe some MovNat spice in there. Okay, so we got a power clean to a broad jump to a Russian twist. Okay, you can still assign them percentages just like you normally would. I have one set of 3 power cleans at 70%, 3 sets of 2 at 80%, and 2 sets of 1 at 90%. Okay, and in between each set, they're doing a set of 3 jumps, okay, and then doing 10 Russian twists per side, and they're just kind of rotating through that. It's sort of the programming that I did for athletes before I started MovNat, and that's what I did a lot in college as a Division I wrestler. Next, they're moving on to deadlifts, but instead of just doing maybe some more abdominal work, they're going to do some foot pinches. Okay, they're just going to get up there and do what we did earlier. Okay, hanging on the bar, lifting their legs up, just connecting the dots of bringing in a practical movement that we know is going to improve their torso strength, improve their lat strength, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so they're doing 3 sets of 5 at 70% of their deadlift max, 3 sets of 5 foot pinches in a row, consecutive reps. Then bent over rows to pause bench, which are just more classical, strength and power exercises. Okay, a superset of those. Okay, then instead of a regular circuit at the end, we're going to do a more MovNat style movements, but in a more strength and conditioning twist. Okay, so we're doing a waist carry, which is carrying something in front of you, which we always do a lot of like farmer's walk type stuff. Let's not forget that we can hold stuff in front of us, use our grip strength, manipulate our center of gravity. Okay, we're going to superset that with a foot hand crawl. Okay, you're going to do 30 seconds of the carry with something pretty heavy, and 30 seconds in a row of foot hand crawl, and then take a 30-second break. And you can manipulate those work to rest ratios over time, and you can swap out the movements and so on and so forth. But here's an example competence emphasized session. So again, we're not totally ignoring capacity, but we're emphasizing competence. So we're doing the same thing. We're warming up with ground movements, our general base of just being able to move. Okay, we're doing specific drills, whatever they are. So that's going to best apply to prepare our athletes for what they're doing next. Okay, and then our emphases for this particular block of training is climbing and jumping. We're trying to specifically improve the skills of climbing and jumping. Okay, both in terms of capacity, but mostly in terms of competence. Okay, so we're still going to start with a deadlift. Okay, but we're just working at a lower percentage of our 1 rep max here. We're working at 60% for a set of 4. Okay, really a set of 4 I probably could do, at 60% I could probably realistically do like 10. Okay, but I'm just doing a set of 4, just kind of greasing the groove, the pattern. Okay, priming my body, keeping up baseline strength. Then I'm going to forearm pull-ups. Okay, and I'm just doing 5 times 1 minus my rep max. So if I know I can do 5 in a row, I'm going to do 4 each set. Okay, just get up there and do my forearm pull-up slow and smooth. Okay, just working toward the skill of the pop-up. Okay, and then I'm doing a downward jump to a precision landing, my next superset, and then an inverted crawl. So 2 pure MovNat movements. Okay, you don't really do pure depth jumps or downward jumps in strength and conditioning unless you're like jumping back up onto something. Okay, using that sort of reactive strength. Okay, but we're going to practice a downward jump to a precision landing. Precision landing doesn't always have to mean a beam. It can mean a circle. It can mean whatever you want it to. As Erwan showed, there could be a depth and a distance, or there could be purely a depth. Okay, in this case, we're working to 5 reps to a beam that's, let's say, a foot away from the height of the box. And the height of the box you could assign being waist height or 36 inches or height minus whatever. You know, you can control these variables as much as you want to. Okay, and then doing an inverted crawl for 10 meters. Okay, and you can add a load to that if you want. You can add complexity. You can do whatever you want. And then our combo, our finisher, is going to be more, again, MovNat style, where we're just kind of running through the sequence, taking a short break, and then running through the sequence again. So we have a single hand carry, okay, a foot hand crawl, a kettlebell swing, and stepping under something. Okay, you can just link these in a sequence. Okay, you can set it up and just have people run through it. That's how we do it in our classes. Okay, sometimes, you know, if people are kind of moving through it and it's not very difficult, we can either increase the capacity by adding more work, or we can make, say this single hand carry, we can just throw a beam on the ground and have them walk, and now doing it in a balancing context on their 3rd or 4th time through. Okay, these are just examples. All right, so let's play some jazz. So really it's up to you guys. There's a creativity here. I can't totally spoon feed you on this, and nor would I want to, and I don't think you would want me to either. I'm just trying to throw out some ideas on how we can organize this. I know there's going to be an inherent resistance to this because of inertia, right? We're used to doing things a certain way. But I've already played with it a bunch, and I think it's very effective. It works. It's just a matter of organizing it in a way that's going to work for you and your athlete. And really, we want that feedback because we want to know what's working. That's because we're still in that hypothesis phase. So that's it.